Whoops.
Okay. We'll let everybody trickle in here.
Can you see my, can you see my thing when I put it up there or not?
I only see your presentation.
Okay, you can't see my Zoom controls? Cool.
Nope.
Thank you.
So as people are filtering in, we've got about 15 people that have joined us so far. If you wouldn't mind putting in the chat where you're from and what you're most excited about today, we'll just be a few more minutes till we get started. Wow, from both coasts today, New York, California, Texas. Love to see it. Ooh, all the way up to Maine, Hawaii. Wow, this is awesome. Okay. Stacey and Noelle, do we want to go ahead and get started?
Okay. Yep, I think we're going to start.
Cool. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us for this webinar. We'll be focusing on how to integrate analytics, sustainability, and critical thinking into your managerial accounting courses. My name is Caitlin Murray. I'm the marketing manager for our accounting team, and I'm joined by my colleague, Noelle Bathurst, who's our senior portfolio manager. Since all of the attendees are on mute, we'll kind of be hanging behind the scenes today, monitoring the chat, helping with Q&A boxes. So if you have any questions along the way or comments, feel free to enter them in the chat or message us directly. And we're excited to be joined here today by award-winning Stacey Whitecotton from Arizona State University. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to Stacey.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Hi, everybody. I did try to put in my chat that I am here from sunny Arizona. It's finally prime time in Arizona, beautiful 75 degrees probably. So anyway, welcome. I'm not sure if you could see that or not, but I'm happy to be here today to talk to you a little bit about a new case that I have written for the 5th edition of my textbook, which is on managerial accounting. And so the name of the case is Bene Petit, and I'll explain where that comes from in just a minute. But it is an integrated case that's designed to run throughout a managerial accounting course. It could be used at different levels, whether it is an undergraduate. It's primarily aimed at the introductory level, but it's also, you could use it in an MBA course, which I've done before. There's other courses you could potentially use it in. I use it in my cost course too. I just kind of customize what I do in terms of the depth of the assignments, depending on the audience. So I'm going to try to sort of do a 1 hour, 50-minute, probably 45-minute by now, fly by all of the different parts of it. But it is actually designed to run across an entire course, all right, and hit most of the main topics that we cover in managerial accounting. So we're going to start with the first part, which is actually something I don't normally do a lot of in managerial accounting, but we do talk about kind of starting up businesses and sort of the strategy of a business and, sort of that part of it that comes first. So there's a very simple Tableau dashboard activity that I built in for the startup business that I'll talk about, that is something you could assign the students so they have some understanding of what this business is all about. And then we started in obviously in the costing. And so the second part is cost driver analysis. And I do a little bit of Excel for some regression. And also there's some Tableau dashboards that you could use for that if you want. And then sort of the meat of the course, for me at least, I love decision making. That's my favorite part of teaching managerial accounting. And so there's a lot of different applications in this particular setting, whether it's cost, volume, profit analysis, or make or buy decisions, or special order decisions, etc. Budgeting and variance is also a very meaty part of managerial accounting. I don't love the budgeting part, but the variances is always really fun to teach. And so I have both the budgeting and the variance built into an Excel assignment that could translate into a dashboard that either students do or you provide them, so that they get some understanding of what does this mean for a manager? How does a manager use this information? And I think that's really important, especially when you're teaching introductory students who aren't necessarily going to be accountants. That's why I like to teach managerial accounting. Is I want to explain to them accounting is important, even if you're not going to be an accounting major. And so this is a great way to do that. And then the fifth part of it, I probably will not get to today. I may not get to part 4, but I'm going to try. But that's kind of where it all wraps up with performance evaluation and analysis. So that's kind of my plan. This is a hypothetical case, but it's actually modeled after a real business. So sometimes I like to show the students this video just to make them realize kind of what this is modeled after. So usually I ask for a show of hands, how many people have ever ordered a pair of Bombas socks? But I can't do that today. I guess you could virtually raise your hand. So I'm going to show this really quick video as a kind of the inspiration for the case.
It's not for sale in any stores, and you can't buy it online. But somehow we just shipped our 10 millionth pair. You may be wondering, who makes a sock that no one can buy? I'm Randy.
And I'm Dave.
And we're Bombas. Socks are the #1 most requested clothing item at homeless shelters. So for every pair of super comfortable Bombas socks you buy, we donate this pair to someone in need. They're specifically designed to meet the needs of the homeless community, with reinforced seams and antimicrobial treatment in darker colors to show less visible wear. And thanks to your purchases and support, we just donated our 10 millionth pair to shelters around the country. It's these 10 million small acts of human kindness that make this the greatest sock never sold. Give a pair when you buy a pair at bombas.com.
Okay, that's kind of a marketing-based demonstration of Bombas, and I hope you guys could hear it. I know it might have been a little bit faint, but that's actually was kind of the inspiration for this case. Is I wanted to do something with a kind of social entrepreneurship bent, something with a one-for-one business model to potentially use. So I kind of got this idea for using Bombas as the basic point, but I didn't want to actually do a sock manufacturer. So I changed it from socks basically to a similar kind of business that is providing a meal delivery service. So it's kind of Bombas meets HelloFresh, if you're familiar with HelloFresh. And I was trying to look for something that could be tangible for the students, that they would understand, meal prep, cooking, etc. And it's kind of a blend of sort of some manufacturing elements in terms of having raw materials and labor and such, but it also has a service element, a service setting element, which we're always trying to get to in managerial accounting. So the name for the case, by the way, Bene Petit is what I came up with. Bombas supposedly means bumblebee, is how they came up with that. So working together in a hive to do good, kind of. So essentially, I named this business Bene Petit. Kind of sounds like bon appetit, but good for Bene and Petit for small. So that's kind of the one-for-one mission for this business. And the case itself is about someone named Taylor, who is a former culinary student / parent who becomes an entrepreneur and starts a meal delivery business out of her kitchen because she's a great cook and she's making healthy things for her family, etc. And she starts using the leftover ingredients to make meals for other families in need in the community, and it kind of grows from there. So essentially, it's like Bombas, where they have a dual mission. It wants to be an economically viable business, so there is still a profit orientation, but there's this other objective, equally important objective, which is to help families with children, or the specific kind of target demographic for the social contribution piece of the business, and specifically looking at families who are in transitional housing, which is kind of a bridge between homelessness and permanent housing. So that's kind of the setting, and the case itself has a couple of pages of background about how this all got started. So some of my objectives in this is, my students at least all like to think they're going to be entrepreneurs, whether they will or not. They like the idea of that. And so it kind of engages them, especially if they're non-accounting majors. like I said. I wanted to apply the concepts that we teach in managerial accounting to something that's pretty simple that they can understand, but it's also not a traditional manufacturing environment that we kind of get tired of talking about in managerial accounting. I wanted to force them to integrate concepts across the entire course to improve their critical thinking skills. The students like the social responsibility aspect of it. A lot of us, when we teach sustainability, we often focus on the triple bottom line. We focus on the kind of environmental aspects of it. And there is some of that in the case as well, but it's more looking at the social dimension, the do-good dimension, if you will, of this business. And the students really seem to appreciate that. Like I said, their analytical skills, I'm going to focus mostly today on kind of the data-driven decision-making that we always try to get to in managerial accounting when we can. And finally, it's a really fun case to teach, and I have tried to make it easy to implement for you. And so I'm going to show you some of the things that I've done to try to make it where you could actually assign it and not have to grade every single piece of it. If you're not doing it as a giant project, it would be auto-graded, essentially. So I'm going to walk through that. In terms of the structure of the case, I kind of talked about this at the beginning, but there are 5 parts that naturally follow the progression of a startup business to start with, but also follow the progression of most managerial accounting courses that you teach, and also the book as well. Most books follow some type of sequence. You know, you might flip a chapter here or there. Sometimes I cover capital budgeting a little earlier in the course instead of at the end, but it generally follows this progression of these 5 different parts. And again, I'm going to talk up to part 4. Often I don't get to part 5, and there's some parts of part 5 that are more like financial statement analysis, financial ratio analysis that I don't teach in my course, but it is nice to show how the managerial topics ultimately kind of blend into the financial accounting performance measures as well. Okay, so each part of the case includes discussion questions. The discussion questions are actually by chapter, and just applying the basic concepts that you're talking about in each topic that we cover, whether it's, you know, cost behavior or job order costing or budgeting or whatever, applying it to that particular setting. There's some multiple choice style questions that are partly by chapter, but they're grouped into each part of the case that we talked about. If you wanted to do a quiz or something to make sure they've read the case in advance. There's a couple of homework style problems that are kind of short little snippets that could be assigned like a homework problem. And then there's a few analytic assignments. There's at least one for each part. And that's primarily what I'm going to talk about. Mostly Excel, but there's a little bit of Tableau and Power BI if you want to just expose your students to that. So I think we might have a poll. I'm hoping we have a poll ready to go. And so my question for you is, do you currently, you can either say require or expect your students to know how to use, for managerial accounting, Excel, Tableau, or Power BI? And can we select just one?
You can select
option?
multiple, so you can select more than
Okay.
one if you're using.
Excellent. So it's select all that you can. I don't think I can participate. It's not letting me.
All right, I think everybody's answered, so I'm going to end and share. There we go.
So everybody can see that, right?
Yes, it should be.
Okay, excellent. So most of us, almost everybody is expecting basic Excel. There's at least one user who's Power BI. By the way, you're probably a better Power BI person than I am. And then a few people that are using Tableau. I'm not sure about the other, but if you want to put that into the chat box, that would be interesting. And I think this is where most of us are at this point in sort of our progression of trying to integrate analytics. I personally think that we've been doing decision analytics all the way. That's what managerial accounting is basically using data to make decisions. But now we've got these new tools. We've always wanted students to use Excel. I still think it's one of the most powerful tools that you can use. But Tableau is also a great way for communicating and displaying information as long as the information is sound. And I actually really like Power BI too, because as an Excel user, it's a much easier transition for me personally to be able to learn that program, because it's a Microsoft-based program and it kind of feels like Excel on steroids. I've had someone explain it as that before. So with some additional capabilities in terms of visualization. Excellent. Okay, so let's start with the first part of it, which is the target market analysis. So this is essentially, this company has kind of a dual mission. and also has two groups of stakeholders, dual stakeholders. So they're making these two different types of meals, customer meals, which they are marketing and distributing to essentially busy, socially conscious professionals with high disposable income. Okay, that's kind of their target demographic for these healthy meals that are already ready to go. You can come home and cook them and spend time with your family and have that really done pretty quickly. So that's kind of their target audience or their target market for that. But they're also having this donation aspect, and they're not donating directly to families in need. They're going to partner with other organizations who will distribute this to families, specifically families with children, and looking at transitional housing. And it's important to understand that because the secondary meals need to be designed for this population. So one of the reasons I like to show that video at the beginning isn't necessarily to get people to buy Bombas socks. I don't own stock, by the way, in Bombas, but rather to recognize that the product that they're donating is really simple. It's a plain black sock. All right, but it's durable. It doesn't show dirt. All right, but they're producing it in a very different way than all of these other colorful ways. They're distributing it in a very different way. And so that has some connotations for cost accounting when we start talking about that. So the full-blown project, which I've assigned before, has a lot of analysis, putting different types of data together. I came up with some data, actual data from the Census Bureau, from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, keeps statistics on homelessness by state and by continuum of care, which we'll talk about. You kind of have to clean it and put it all together with some VLOOKUP tables and compute some metrics. I don't do that for my introductory course, but I have assigned that as a project before. But for this purpose is just to give the students an introduction. There's a really simple Tableau dashboard that they can do a really, really fast assignment, just so they're thinking about what is the purpose of this business and where is it. Or you could do the full-blown project, like for an honors course, for example, or maybe in an MBA team project or something like that. And so essentially for this assignment, I tell them that Taylor, who's the owner of this business, let's assume she lives in the state of Illinois. I don't tell them where, but she's going to launch her business somewhere in that area. She knows homelessness is an issue, and she thinks the demographics of our area will support this one-for-one business model, but she wants some data. So essentially we would give them, or I give them, the Tableau visualization. This is built into Connect. If you're using a McGraw-Hill product, probably familiar with Connect. Or if you're not, you're probably familiar with Connect. And so it's built in, and essentially students would just open the dashboard. I'm not going to click on this file because it probably won't open. This is not a live dashboard, but essentially it would open like this as long as the students have Tableau loaded on their machine. I think they have to have that at least. And so for the live dashboard, you can just click on different states. It has different metrics. The heat map is basically the average, or the median, I should say, income by state. And then there's these continuum of care is a specific area. Think about it as a region, but it's kind of a community plan for addressing homelessness. And then there's some details about how many families, how many children, et cetera. So if we were to drill down onto the state of Illinois, which I believe is this one, I'm going to click it, even though it's not live, but it's going to make it look like it's live. There's a state of Illinois. And so overall, I can't read this because that's in the way, 10,000 or so homeless individuals. This is from 2019 in the state of Illinois. And then this is kind of the breakdown. I don't have this metric showing, so I just kind of made it, about half of which are in the city of Chicago. And then she's specifically interested in helping families. That's the target demographic with children. So it shows how many are people living in families, how many are children. And this is just the percentage who are children out of the total. And so again, they can kind of play with this if they want, but the objective questions are super simple. All right, really simple. Is state of Illinois above or below? Well, they're 65,000, close to 66,000 was the median income. 60,000 is the actual national average in 2019. And so it's slightly above, just a drop down menu. And then I asked them a couple of questions about the homelessness, which one serves the largest number, the second largest number, Chicago, and then the suburbs of Chicago. And this is an open-ended question. When I assigned this most recently, I essentially gave everyone credit for this question after they had done it. And most people are going to go with the largest, but some students might say, no, she really should be looking in the suburbs, starting somewhere smaller. I've occasionally had some students go, why doesn't she go over here to East St. Louis, which is a very small market, and that'd be a good place to start the business, there's a high percentage of children, etc. So super simple. Tableau just gets them familiar with the use of the dashboard, and it looks kind of cool. That's what I do for the first part, and that's kind of chapter 1. All right, essentially, it's just the introductory. What's the purpose of managerial accounting? What kind of data might you be looking at? This isn't really accounting data, by the way, but I think it's good for them to realize you have to integrate a lot of different types of data together. The second part starts getting into product and service costing. And so here is where they needed to have 2 different types of products. And so their main product that they're selling, I call customer meals. And these are somewhat customized for whoever is ordering them. So the way this business works, again, if anyone's ever used HelloFresh, it's like HelloFresh, where they're essentially pre-packaging fresh ingredients. They're prepped and packaged, so it's cut, cleaned, diced, sliced, but they're not yet assembled or cooked. Okay, so that's essentially the type of meal. Customers can pick from 20 to 25 menu options per month that are kind of rotated out. A few items at least are rotated. There's 3 different sizes they can order. They can order just a single serving, a dual serving, or a family serving, which is 4 servings together. And then it's weekly deliveries. And there is a minimum order size in there as well. I think it's like 4 single or 2 dual or something like that. But there's some customization, and they're delivering them door to door. So a lot more customization than the second product, which are these donated meals. And it's 1 for 1. So for every meal, customer meal that they sell, regardless of whether it's a single serving or a dual serving or a family size serving, they're going to donate 1 meal. But these meals, just like the black socks and bombas, are more standardized. Okay, they're pre-cooked and frozen. Again, this is because of the demographic that they're targeting. Okay, and the fact that they're going to be delivered in bulk. And so it's more difficult to have fresh ingredients. You don't necessarily know exactly what kind of facilities the people will have. They are in temporary housing. So we're assuming they've got a microwave or an oven or some way to heat up these meals. There's only 3 menu items. I think it's chicken, spaghetti, and chili, vegetarian chili or something like that. Only 1 size, family size. And they're delivering them in bulk to the partner organizations that they tried to identify through this part 1 analysis. So there's a little bit of variation in the types of meals that they are producing, just to make it have a little bit more richness for the cost analysis. So for the analytics assignment is actually just a cost driver assignment. And I say essentially assume that they've now finished their first year of full scale operations, and they've hired a graduate student to get some data on operating cost and revenue and some potential cost drivers. And the intern has given an Excel file that either has or has not been reviewed for errors. So there's a couple of different options for faculty to use, and I've used different versions of it that I'll talk about, but this is essentially what the data set looks like. It's only 52 observations because it's 1 year's worth of weekly data. You have hypothetical sales revenue, operating cost, and these are their potential cost drivers across here: direct labor hours, menu items, number of customer deliveries, number of donated meal deliveries, which is much smaller because they're ordering them in bulk. And then total meals produced versus customers and donated. And you'll see that customers and donated is exactly the same thing. So it really kind of doesn't matter which of these 3 cost drivers they use, because they're all 100% redundant. So in terms of the variations, the first option is an Excel assignment where you essentially give them a clean Excel file and just have them do some simple and multiple regressions. The second one is the same assignment, except it's got some outliers embedded in it. And so there's a little bit of data cleaning that they have to do before they can start doing the data analysis. And that's an important thing for them to realize, I think, as part of analytics in general. And then the third option is a little more challenging for students. And this is where they would essentially create data visualizations and regressions, do the regressions in Tableau. I have not personally done option 3 yet because I don't really want to teach Tableau. I prefer to use Excel. But if you want them to do something actually in Tableau, there's step-by-step instructions where they can do that. So I'm just going to walk briefly through the first one, which is you give them the clean data set. You have them do a correlation matrix so that they can identify what the single best cost driver is. It turns out in this data set, it's a direct labor hours, because this is a labor intensive business. And the correlation is about 80%. they can translate that into a simple regression and a scatter plot. So prepare a visual diagram of the relationship using the single best cost driver and then adding a regression line. The intercept on the regression line is $16.99. The variable cost is $17.12 a labor hour. And then the R squared, I think I asked them, is about 63%. Okay, so this is just simple regression that they could do in Excel based on the data set that's already clean. And then I also can have them run a multiple regression. And I tell specifically because there's only one, this is auto graded. So I'm trying to drive them to one specific answer. I tell them to include all 5 possible cost drivers, but not to include the redundant variables. So they want to include all the different types of meals and only pick one of those variables. If they do that, they'll get an R square of about 81%, leaving 19% unexplained. So that's if you wanted to do multiple regression in Excel. I'm not going to walk through that, but essentially that's how you would do that. And then you could use it to predict as well. Okay, they would then predict in the future based on the multiple regression model what they're going to do. So that's kind of a standard simple and multiple regression project, not too challenging because it leads them to a specific answer and then it's auto graded based on that. Option 2 is not that much more challenging, but it does have a little bit of data cleaning required in it. So I embedded 3 outliers in the data set and they're highlighted here, but they're not highlighted for the students. They're just highlighted here so you could see what they were. And all I did was I basically added a 0 on top of it. So you can see for this, I think this is the number of meals, 1,600 donated, 1,600 customer meals, and somehow it's 32,000. Right, they probably hard coded that. So all 3 of these errors are just has an extra 0 on top of it. And I think in the description, it says something to the effect that this intern has been known to make typos or something like that. So they're pretty easy outliers to identify. And I tell them specifically, don't delete them. Now, when I've given this to other, like my MBA students, I don't necessarily tell them what to do with the outliers. I let them decide, and depending on what they've learned in their statistics course, sometimes they delete them, sometimes they average them out. And that's okay as long as you're not looking for a specific answer that's auto graded. It's a little bit more realistic scenario where you can have some judgment that comes into how to deal with the outliers. So the only difference is which Excel file you're giving them to start with for those 2. For the Tableau one, I'm not going to go through it, but I will tell you that Tableau makes some really pretty charts for regression. So again, there's very detailed step-by-step instructions for how to do this that would be in Connect, and they would upload the file. It's not auto-graded, but it all would be facilitated through Connect. And so this is a dashboard that essentially is the data that we're working with, and it's all these different simple scatter plots put together in a dashboard. And if this were live in Tableau, I could be clicking on these and looking for different things. This happens to be, if you clicked on this plot of operating cost against labor hours, that's our simple regression, the best case simple regression from before. You get exactly the same answer as you're going to get in Excel. So Tableau provides a nice, pretty picture of the regressions. And it's kind of a nice way for them to think about these different drivers. One of the things I don't like is you can't do multiple regression. So if it's something that you like to talk about incorporating multiple drivers, I would stay with Excel, but this just shows the power of the dashboard. You also would have the option just to give the students the dashboard and play around with it potentially. So that is the Tableau part of part 2. I'm going to take a breath and see how I'm doing on time. Okay. Part 3 is, again, this is kind of where you get to the meat of managerial accounting with cost, volume, profit analysis and a lot of different decision making. This is a scenario where there's a bunch of different assignments that you can use. It's not one big, just single project. You could sort of pick and choose which pieces of it you wanted to do, starting with the cost, volume, profit. And in order to make this doable, I have given it before to the students where I just said, make your own spreadsheet. And I've learned that it's better to give them a starting spreadsheet and kind of narrow them into kind of the decision-making part of it. And so this is all the data that's about the cost, volume, profit. Most of this is in the case itself. And so I'm not going to read through that, but this is just reinforces what the business model looks like. So it's all the data they need to do that. And then there's a starting spreadsheet that, again, I give them that they would download out of Connect as a starting point. These cells that are highlighted down here with the break-even point are not filled in initially. So the students have to calculate the break-even points or include formulas to calculate the break-even and the margin of safety. But all of this top part of it is already pre-done. And it is done correctly so that everything is tied to the input values using formulas that will auto-populate. And so the first thing I want to do is make sure they got the starting spreadsheet right, that they did this first part right. So the first assignment just says, you know, did you do this right? This is essentially check figures, if you will, for the starting spreadsheet to make sure they got the break-even point right, the margin of safety right. How many meals would they be donating if they're at break even? It's actually 16,000 meals based on this hypothetical data at break even. So this is just checking to make sure they're on the right track. Once they get the check figures, then they can start doing different types of sensitivity analysis or what if analysis in break even. So one of the things I have them do is learn how to use the goal seek function in Excel to figure out how many meals would have to be sold to earn a target profit of 126,000. And I tell them, you know, how to use the goal seek function by changing operating income to 126 and only allowing one cell to change, which is the total number of customer meals. If they do that correctly in Excel, they should be able to answer these two questions. Okay, so these are all just different types of what if scenarios that they can do. And if the spreadsheet is correct, they should just be able to change one number and basically get these answers and see kind of the power of cost volume profit analysis. All right, there's also changing the sales mix. Much easier to do if you've got it in a spreadsheet. And so they can just change those three numbers, change the sales mix from whatever it was initially to 10% single, 20% dual, and 70% family size. So that's the cost volume profit. And then I have three sort of special decisions, managerial decisions. One is a special order problem. This is typical of something we might assign just as a textbook problem, where they have a special offer, a special order come along. This is actually for a fundraising opportunity for a high school. They're going to give a discounted price and trying to decide whether or not to accept or reject it. One of the things that I like is it also includes kind of some qualitative data, like if the special order isn't profitable, it could still be counted as part of their social mission to contribute to the local community. And so they have to think more than just about profit, which is what we always focus on when we do the special order. And then again, just checking, this one kind of guides them through every piece of the incremental analysis that they would need to do. And then finally, what's the incremental profit? It's a very small incremental profit in this problem. It's only $2,000. It is positive. So should they accept or reject? And again, this is a qualitative answer that you could include or exclude or get everybody credit for it. But this is just to show there's not one exact answer in the problem. There's also a make or buy decision, and this is whether or not they should be delivering the meals themselves. They have a fleet of trucks, or should they be contracting with FedEx or UPS or something? So it gives some data. This is one, again, kind of like part one, where I give them a dashboard that's already created. And so they would download the dashboard file. It looks something like this. And again, this is not live, but if it were live, they could click at different levels of activities in terms of volume. I think it's monthly volume or weekly volume, I can't remember, and different things. So for example, if they pick 13,000 as the number of orders, sorry, this is the number of orders, they should choose insourcing because it's about $9,000 less expensive. So this is a pre-made dashboard that they can use to analyze the difference between making and buying at different levels of volume. And then there's the questions that would follow up just to auto grade to make sure that they use the dashboard and were able to use it successfully. Again, this is a super simple Tableau type dashboard problem, but very consistent with what we're talking about in class when we're doing incremental analysis. And then the last one is a keep or drop analysis. And this is based on the single serving. So if you look at the single serving meals down here, they're slightly unprofitable on the bottom line basis. So the question is, should they get rid of single serving meals? In addition to being unprofitable, they also use a lot of materials and packaging that's going to waste, etc. And so they can walk through and do the incremental analysis. Again, I tried to structure it so that it's very specific and reasonably simple in terms of how they need to analyze this, and then figure out whether or not they should eliminate the single serve product line from the menu offering. All right, take a breath real quick. And again, this is one where they can bring in the triple bottom line. Like I said, I've had students before say, it's so wasteful, all the packaging, etc. You know, there's some environmental aspects that they could build in here as well. Okay, and then the fourth part, which is this is also a meaty part of it for budgetary planning and control, is I tell them that they're now in their 3rd year of operation. They're on track to make a small profit during year 3, and we're going to start planning for year 4. And so based on the upward trend of sales, we have some industry estimates of growth in the service sector. And this is kind of their sales forecast, if you will, for each quarter of the upcoming year. Okay, so this is their sales forecast. And based on that, we're going to have them do a master budget. Again, this is one where I provide a spreadsheet that is mostly finished, but I have them fill in, for example, the purchases budget. Because it's a service setting, they don't have inventory. It doesn't lend itself as well to doing like a production budget as an example, but you have raw material purchases and it does the whole master budget. I'm only going to show, this is all the detail that they're going to have, by the way, that they need to do the master budget in terms of the manufacturing cost and selling expenses, etc. And this is one also, again, where there's 3 different options. Okay, so the first part is just this Excel spreadsheet that I'm going to talk through that has them do all the budgets and all the variances. There's also a Power BI dashboard activity that you can do of 2 types. One is where you give them the dashboard and have them use it. So using the Power BI dashboard or creating it themselves. And as I said before, Power BI, I think, is a little easier to use than Tableau because it looks a lot like Excel and other Microsoft products. And so it's pretty intuitive. And what I like about it is it actually looks like a decomposition of a variance. And so they have a specific type of graph in Power BI that lends itself well to variance decomposition. And so I'm going to talk through the Excel spreadsheet so you'll get an idea of how that works. And then I'll show you what the dashboards look like. And those are built in with detailed instructions. So for the Excel part, again, they're going to build out this whole master budget on a different tab with all of the details by quarter. But this is just the kind of result of the master budget. They should, if they do it correctly, they should come up with operating profit of about $132,000 based on the starting assumptions. And I give them the master budget Excel file that they would download and just complete a small part of it. And then this populates on a different tab. The second part of it then is to do a flexible budget. All right, so preparing the flexible budget where they adjust the sales volume. And also I have them adjust the sales mix, which isn't something I normally talk about in my introductory managerial accounting, but it's a nice way to introduce the idea of a mix variance without them having to calculate the detailed variances that you'd get in cost or something else. So the flexible budget ends up being $187,000 in profit because their actual volume was higher than what they expected. And also the mix was shifted slightly. So this would be the results of the flexible budget. And then the last part is now in the Excel is to do the actual results. So this is just a bunch of detail that they need in order to get all the actual information. Lots of detail here, but it would be provided there. And if they do all of that correctly, in a separate tab, they'll come up with actual operating income of about $175,000. So higher than what the master budget planned, but a little bit lower than the flexible budget, essentially. And so they have a total profit variance of about $43,000. And most of that is attributable to the volume, and there's some spending and pricing issues in here as well. So then the variance then is going to drill down into all of this stuff that's going on here in the middle. When we get to the variance part. This is again how it would be graded if you were using Connect to have all of the auto graded answers, check figures, etc., to make sure they're doing it right. These are the specific variances that they could compute, not yet broken down. For example, the material variance isn't yet broken down into the price and the quantity variance. It's just the spending variance. So there's one multiple choice that just asks them about the overall spending variances, primarily fixed and variable. And it has more than just, usually when I teach managerial accounting, I only talk about materials and labor and maybe a little bit of overhead and fixed. But here they have some delivery expense variances as well for the different types of deliveries that they're doing as well. So that's how it's kind of broken out. And then if you wanted to go even further, you could decompose the material, labor, and variable overheads are the only two that I am breaking down into more specific, the detailed variances that we typically calculate in managerial accounting. So it's a pretty rich budgeting and variance analysis scenario. But again, at least I find that the students start to get overwhelmed by all of this data. It's like, it's too many numbers. I'm starting to feel it myself right now looking at this spreadsheet. I'm feeling overwhelmed. And so the nice thing about the dashboard is that it is going to show you what it looks like. So the advantage of the Power BI is to think about, okay, once an accountant has done all of these variances, what is a manager going to, how are they going to use this? Okay, so the Power BI dashboard essentially takes these variances. We have a total profit variance of $42,000 and breaks it down into what type of product is it? Is it for customer meals or donated meals, or is it just these shared expenses? I just put all the fixed expenses down here separate. Almost everything is about the customer meals. So you've got the volume variance, you've got the flexible budget variance, you've even got a price variance, which I don't normally have my students compute, but it is there. This one happens to be set up where green is favorable and red is unfavorable. And again, this is a really easy dashboard to create in Power BI because it is like this decomposition is just one of the options. And so it's point and click, 3 or 4 clicks, and it will create this out of a variance diagram. These are your material spending variances decomposed even further. If this dashboard were live, the students would be able to click on, something else. Maybe they want to look at the labor spending variances. All right. And when you click on the labor spending variances, it'll show you how much of it is the quantity and how much of it is the rate variance or the efficiency and the rate variance. Maybe they want to look at spending variance or the fixed variances. So here are their fixed production variances, their selling expense variance, and their administrative expense variance. So it kind of has a way of them saying, we're trying to explain this $42,000 total profit variance to see where we're doing well and not so well. So I think it's kind of a nice way to kind of get back to the managerial implications of something that tends to get somewhat tedious for students. And again, this is one where you could either give them the dashboard. We call those, I think, dashboard activities versus, I'm going to go back here for just a minute. Here we go. The dashboard activity is one where they're just using the Power BI dashboard, and this applying Power BI is one where they would create the dashboard using step-by-step instructions. Point and click. I don't teach Power BI, but try to provide the instructions where students know exactly how to do it, and that would be provided in this specific option. Okay, we're just about out of time. I just want to talk briefly about the 5th part, which is kind of wrapping it all up. Again, this is more financial accounting, but I think it's nice for them to see what happens. This is a summary of their financial results for the first 3 years of operations. Give them a spreadsheet, have them calculate things like return on investment, net profit margin, etc. There's also a component in here where they can do some looking at a sustainability report for a competitor. So not just financial ratios. There's also a part where I ask them to do a balanced scorecard and think about some different types of metrics in the non-financial categories of a balanced scorecard. And so this kind of ties it all together. There's also a Tableau visualization activity where they would create those just to give them, again, some hands-on experience with playing with Tableau, if that is important to you. Just a little bit of feedback from students when I've used this case. They liked having a constant business example that they could relate to. They thought the food delivery service was kind of something trendy, something their age group can use too. Students like the donation aspect or this social entrepreneurship idea, way of giving back. I've had people say they liked that it was a young entrepreneur, a young female entrepreneur. Somebody said, I've got a partner that's starting up a business just like this, or a different kind of business, but starting up a business and going through these kind of decisions. And then a couple of people that said discussing the exact same case over 5 weeks is really, really boring. And they don't want to hear the words Bene Petit for a long, long time after this. So you always get a little negative feedback with the positive, but I have enjoyed teaching the case and writing it. And I hope you like it. Maybe you'll use it.
Hey,
Feedback
Stacey,
or suggestions right here.
One
I'm
quick
going to turn it back to
question for you.
Caitlin as the moderator.
One quick question for you, Stacey, and thanks for going through all of this. Any suggestions on how you integrate this, like find time for this extra piece in your course?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess I'd say two things. One of the things that I've intentionally tried to do is make it so that some of it is kind of an add-on, but these are all things that I'm covering anyway, right? I'm talking about budgeting, I'm talking about variances. And so I teach a lot online. And so using it as something that you can assign online as an extra assignment, you could do it as an extra credit assignment if you wanted, just to get them in there and do it. But I do think it's a lot easier when you're doing either a hybrid or an online class, because you can just deliver it through Connect. But even if it were in a face-to-face class, I think that you could use the discussion questions during class, kind of to talk about the concepts. You could assign the things outside of class where they do that. There's a lot of variation in terms of how deep you'd have to go. Right. And one of my most recent classes where I just wanted to give them some exposure, I just did the original dashboard and then I had them do the regressions. All right. That's what was just 2 little assignments in Connect that were not that, didn't take that much extra time. And when you pull them in, you could pull them in as part of a homework assignment. I haven't done this yet, but I could see assigning the quiz questions as kind of like a before class assignment that they have to do. All right, so that they're kind of conceptual questions, like which of the following is an example of a variable cost for this business, or which one is an example of a fixed cost, or something like that. It's basically tying to the concepts that you're talking about. So it is something we're always asked to do more and more, all right, in our classes. And I think we all are, at least I know personally, like my students are barely getting the stuff that I have to teach anyway. And so I tried to design this where the add-on of this case is reinforcing the stuff they need to be learning anyway. They already need to be learning cost, volume, profit. They already need to be learning how to do a make or buy analysis. They need to be learning what a difference between a flexible budget and a master budget is. And so just this is a way to give it context. And again, especially if you assign it in Connect, I think it would be relatively easy to assign outside of class for students. And it seemed like a lot. I went through it all in an hour, but again, this is over an entire course. So maybe you have one. In fact, I did this in my recent online class where I had one in week 1. In week 2, I had another activity, and then they took their exam. And then I did another one when I started covering cost, volume, profit, etc. So I don't know if I answered the question appropriately, but lots of different ways you can implement it. And I'm working on a more detailed implementation guide as well, or I should probably talk more about that.
No, that's fantastic, Stacey. And thank you for mentioning the implementation guide, because I had forgotten about.
Yeah.
One person had a great question. Do you have a sample syllabus that includes this, like how you're incorporating this and how it's graded, or like % of total grade for the class? And that was a question that came in from Lori.
I do not, but I think that's a great idea. I do know we have a sample course and a sample syllabus that we're already designing for the 5th edition. And I think we should try to for sure put those in as extra items. That's a great idea.
Someone else pointed out, so parts 1 through 3 of the case are live right now in Connect. Stacey is actually working with us to finalize parts 4 and 5. They are coming very, very soon. We're testing out little bits of them to make sure that they're all working correctly. So if you're looking for anything that you're not seeing, just know that it is on the way. And if anybody wants access to those earlier parts of the case, or if you've got further questions or would like a copy of the Connect course, please just let Stacey know, or let myself or Caitlin know. We'll make sure to get that out for you.
Yeah, and I guess I should say, because the Connect part is just now going live. All right. So I started writing this case maybe a year and a half ago or something, and I've been using it in my class. So part of the reason why I say you could do it this way, or you could do it this way, is I've used it in different classes depending on what stage of development it was in. And literally, like the class that I'm teaching right now, they've gone through parts 1 and 2, and I'm ready to assign part 3, and those are just now going live. And so I'm testing it out. But the Connect piece of it, is just now coming, and that's going to make it so much easier to assign. The first time I assigned it, I just assigned it as team projects. It was super unstructured. I didn't even have the Tableau dashboards yet. I just gave my students, and it was MBA students, I believe. I said, here's the project. Go make some pretty dashboards, and they did amazing, much better than I could have done. Our students are really good. The ones that know how to use it, they're really good with some of these technologies and coming up with creative solutions. And so I don't find that I have to teach them those tools most of the time. So other questions? I saw something about downloading Power BI or something in there.
Yeah, Eric had a great question. There's a simplified version of Power BI that's just browser based, so doesn't require the software, but they also obviously have the desktop version. Do the Power BI exercises that we've got with the case require that desktop version, or can you use just the web components? So what do students need?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I suspect it would be the browser should be fine, because it's not a very complicated dashboard, and they're not having to do a lot. But I am a very naive user of both Tableau and Power BI. I'm like 2 clicks ahead of my students most of the time on this. So you might have a better idea, and I'd be happy to send you the file and you could try it if you do that. And this is in part, the Power BI dashboard is in part 4, which should be going live very soon, but I have the files and I've been sharing those with people. If you wanted to take a look at it and see if it works just fine with having the browser, that would be really nice if they don't have to download it.
Agreed. And I know those the Power BI dashboard assignments just don't even require students to go out to Power BI, right? Like kind of that dashboard.
Oh, you know what?
part
I
of the
think you're
problem,
right.
yeah.
I think you're right. I think the ones, and for sure on the Tableau, like that first one that I used, and the make or buy, it just runs in Connect. They don't have to actually use the software. But if they were going to build the dashboard, and honestly, I don't know I am not sure I see the value of them building it necessarily. I think it's more important, especially for intro, that they just know how to, like, what does this mean? If I'm a manager, why do I care about variances? And I find that they start to glaze over, especially it's at the end of the semester. It's a pretty complicated topic, lots of formulas, and they kind of start to forget what they're doing. So it's a way of kind of bringing it back to the big picture that we start out with when we talk about budgeting and variances and control systems and stuff. So anyway, other questions or comments?
We have 2 comments in the back that are looking for access to it. So Noelle or Stacey, can you point them where to find it in Connect?
Yeah, in Connect. So, well, it's in the 5th edition Connect course, and it's Nicole might be able to, or no, I'm sorry, Noelle might be able to answer this more easily. I can show if my screen will work. Essentially, when you are creating an assignment, so you basically go like you were going to create an assignment in Connect. And instead of picking chapter 1 or chapter 2, because this is integrated, it's in a totally separate category that is called New Integrated Analytics Case, I think is what it's labeled. And then you'd pull that up, and there's part 1, 2, and 3 are live now. And then within that, you would then click which pieces you want of it.
And I've got a note. I'll follow up with explicit directions and some screen grabs. We can also share out the pre-built Connect course and make sure that this is kind of the case parts are built into that as well. So easy to assign.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea.
Yep. So Lori and Bridget, I've got you guys both noted. I'll make sure to send that over to you.
Did you say there was another one, Caitlin?
Nope. That's it right now in the chat. Unless anybody has any lingering ones that want to come in last minute. Okay. I guess everyone's holding their peace. But like I said, thanks so much for joining us today. Stacey, I'm so excited about this new case. You've kind of made me hungry for dinner. But to everybody on the call today, if you have any questions about the case or Stacey's book for managerial accounting, reach out to our local team or your McGraw-Hill representative, and we'll get you a desk copy, help with implementation support, you name it, we'll be right there with you. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Thank you so much, Stacey.
Thanks.